Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. And that's right, the first 4-box we have ever had on DodgerHeads. Matt Moreno, Blake Williams, Scott Geirman, all of DodgerBlue.com joining us tonight. And roundtable conversation tonight, a square table, maybe because there's 4 of us, but a conversation about the shortstop position. We knew this was going to be the biggest need coming into the offseason. We knew there was going to be questions, but surely all these big free agents out there, surely the Dodgers, the rich, wealthy, spend money Dodgers would get someone. Well, here we are. The top 3 Tier 1A are all off the board. There's one guy left in Tier 1B, and then we drop down to Tier 6, 7. I don't know how far down the list we go. But Matt, Blake, Scott, let me start with this question, and it's just a quick one. 10 is completely panicked. 0 is everything is fine. Scott, I'll start with you. When it comes to the Dodgers shortstop position today, give me a number 1 to 10.
I'm going to say about a 7.
Okay, Blake?
Yeah, solid 7.
I'm going to go right in the middle at 5.
Okay, 5 for Blake. Matt?
So I'll split the difference between the two of them. I'll go a 6.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm at 5. I think, as we're going to get into, I don't think the sky has completely fallen. I think there are options out there, whether it's internally, whether it's externally, that there's ways to make this, to sort of smooth this one over, patch this one together. And so I've got a few questions tonight. Let's start with the first one, and Matt, I'm going to come to you, and I'd love to get each of your thoughts on this. Given the choice, would you have signed any of the free agent shortstops at the dollar and year number that they signed for, knowing what you know now? So it's easy when Trey Turner signs with the Phillies to say, well, Bogaerts is still out there and Correa is still out there. And even after Xander, you could say, well, Correa is still out there. The Dodgers have been linked. As of today, all 3 of those guys are gone. As a refresher, Carlos Correa got 13 years and $350 million. That was 4 years and $62 million over MLB Trade Rumors projections. Trey Turner got 11 for $300. Xander Bogaerts got 11 for $280. That one was the craziest. 4 years, $91 million over the projection. So, Matt, given the choice, if you could go back in time and sign one of those guys at the number that they got, would you have done any of them?
No, I mean, this has ended up being crazy money. Obviously, before Trey signed his contract and we did different videos on free agency outlook and stuff like that. I mean, you, myself, I think even Scott, I'm not sure if we had Blake as part of those, were reluctant, of what it would look like if it took like 8 or 9 years for Trey, right? Like what were years 7, 8, 9 going to look like? And so then you see what he ended up getting. It's just not, it's not something I would have done. And I don't necessarily fault the Dodgers for doing that, for not doing any of those deals.
Yeah. Blake, I'll come to you next. Those numbers, I mean, they're big numbers, big years, big money, big everything. Would you have signed one of those guys knowing what you know now?
I wouldn't have, but if I had to pick one, I would have picked Trey Turner's deal, just because $27 million for a player like him a year isn't that bad, but it's still a lot long term. 11 years is a lot to commit to a player. I was thinking about how old I'm going to be when that contract is up, and it's just kind of crazy. So it's hard to see that far into the future, and the more years you add, the more risk you have. So no, I don't think I would have, but it's not my money. So
I told Scott this morning on our video that Correa, my second grader, will be finishing her junior year of college when Correa is done. The free agent year is 2036. So supposedly that's going to be a real year that's going to happen. We see there. Scott, Correa, 13 for $350. Trey, 11 for $300. Xander, 11 for $280. Would you have gone back in time and done any of those deals?
I'm with Blake on Trey, honestly. I know that Carlos Correa, for me, I like talent. I understand talent, and you even conceded that this morning, that Carlos Correa, aside from everything else, he's an incredibly talented player. But I would have signed Trey. I would have. That is the money that these players are going to get. The luxury tax is going to do nothing but go up. So, with the talent and for the next few years, I would have done the Trey deal. I actually would have taken that Trey Turner contract.
Okay, Scott, I'm gonna pull a question from the chat, and we'll go rapid fire to you first, then Blake, then Matt. Somebody asks, if you could go back in time and do the Corey Seager trade deal, would you do that? He signed a 10-year, $325 million deal a year ago. So if you could have gone back in time, 10 for 325 on Corey Seager a year ago. Would you have done that?
100%.
Okay, you're in on that, Blake?
Yeah, I would have. I think his bat's going to age the best because he's just a pure hitter. So, yeah, that's one I would have done. And I said at the time they should have.
Matt?
I don't think I would, mainly because the health concerns. I agree with Blake in terms of his bat, and just I think Seager will maybe age the best out of all those guys. You could put him at third base if you have to, but his health is what would have concerned me.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these numbers. He's getting the highest AAV of any of the guys that we have just mentioned, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, Corey Seager got 10 for 325. Trey got 11 for 3. So, I mean, he got less money and an extra year. I mean, not that the 11th year really matters at this point, because these guys are going to be like 65 by the time those contracts end. But it's an interesting thing. I'm with you guys. I would have said no to all of these deals. Correa, Trey, and Xander. Xander was the guy that I kind of liked the best because I thought there was going to be value, and there was no value to be had. Correa, we've gone over. We don't need to beat that dead horse. Trey Turner, I have concerns. Somebody mentioned, Corey Seager's bat aging the best. I think Trey Turner, my guess, might age the worst of all of the four guys that we're talking about here. Again, I know that's maybe a minority opinion of the four people up here, but I'm with you guys. I would have said no to all these, and even the Corey Seager one, in hindsight, I still think is an incredible amount of money for a guy with the injury history that he has. I mentioned that all of the Tier 1A guys are gone. There is one Tier 1B player still out there, depending on how you rank them, but that's Dansby Swanson. We've talked about how good Dansby Swanson is coming off a career year. He arguably had a better year than any other free agent shortstop this past season. The problem for him is it was the outlier when you look at his career. This is a guy who's been average to below average offensively, solid to really good defensively at shortstop. He was projected at 7 years and $154 million coming into the offseason. As I said, all three guys we've already mentioned got 3 more years than MLB trade rumors projected at least, and all of them got an extra 30 to 90 million as well. So we'll do a rapid fire, or excuse me, not necessarily rapid fire, but you could share your thoughts on Swanson. But if I take the 7,154 and bump it to 9 years, $200 million, Matt, actually, Blake, you know what? We'll start with you. You haven't gotten a chance to go first. We'll be equal opportunity here. 9 for $200 million on Dansby Swanson, knowing that he's the only guy in this tier left out there. Yes or no for you?
No, although I really like the AAV of that. I just don't see him aging well because he's only really had one good year hitting, and even then his second half was not very good. And to me, it kind of reminds me of the Jason Hayward contract what the Cubs gave out. You're paying for defense with an average bat, and I just don't think that's the kind of player you want to invest in. If you do it for 5 years or something, I'm really good with that. I'd even go up to 25 million AAV, but 9 years, I'm not going that far with him.
Okay, Scott, we'll come to you next. 9 for 200 on Dansby Swanson, knowing he's the only guy left in free agency. He's clear, I guess we could get into whether or not he's an upgrade over Gavin Lux, but I think it's safe to say he's probably an upgrade over Gavin Lux. But if that's the cost, 9 for 200, are you interested in that or no?
No. If you're speaking, if you're unsure if it's a clear of upgrade over Gavin Lux and you're unsure about the bat, you don't sign that deal.
Yeah.
I just like Blake said, he's only had 1 year where you're really eye-popping numbers. Sure, he has an incredible second half. He was one of the hottest hitters in baseball last year. But Blake hit it right on with the defense. You don't pay for defense. I don't like the fact that he is the last option. And then we're now are we prepared to give Dansby Swanson one of those contracts? They're not. I'm not. I don't think Brandon Friedman is either.
When you say he's the hottest hitter, were you referring to his bat or his looks, just to clarify there, Scott?
I mean, he's got some of the best hair in the league, man.
That's what I'm saying. Matt, 9 for 200 for Charlie Culberson's body double here. Are we interested?
No, I mean, I agree. Like Blake said, the AAV is enticing, all things considered, when you look at what the other shortstops have received. But 9 years, $200 million for Dansby Swanson, it's still too much for me, and I just don't see that as being money well spent. I don't know if he would be enough of a difference maker when looking at the current roster as it is. If they had some other holes filled, then potentially you could talk me into it. But when, in my opinion, they still have serious issues that need to be addressed, I don't think you can afford $200 million on Dansby. Yeah,
the AAV is interesting and appealing because if you're really serious about getting under the tax this year, having a guy that's $22-ish million kind of tacked on there is that fits nicely into that gap that has been cut into with the Syndergaard signing. That would still leave you with a few $1,000,000 to go and spend to try and find, yet another reclamation project out there. But that's where it gets interesting, because the other theory here is with Swanson is, yes, all these other guys have gone over. We saw Rodon sign a deal today that felt reasonable compared to some of the numbers we've thrown around. Obviously, he had serious health concerns. So I guess what I'm saying out loud is I wonder if Dansby actually does land closer to the 7 for 150 that was originally projected, just because maybe some of these teams that, as I've said, were the crazy people at the party, the Giants, the Padres, the Phillies, the Mets, who were desperate to go and spend money or sort of desperate for a player. If maybe all of them have left and it's just sort of the Dodgers and maybe the Twins and, the Red Sox, allegedly, sort of sitting at the table, Braves for Dansby Swanson, is it possible that number comes down? So just, again, I'll go rapid fire here. Matt, we'll start with you. It sounds like there's a number out there somewhere where Dansby Swanson becomes appealing to you. Like, is that fair?
That's fair. And for me also, it's not so much just the total value of the contract. It would be the years as well. So I think if we get it closer to, maybe the 7 years, 6 years, which seems impossible basically, right? Given how the market has been. But if it moves there and the dollars come down, then you can definitely talk me into that.
Blake, 6 for 150 for Dansby. Are you interested?
It's more tempting, but I still think I'd pass. I'm probably looking at like 5 years max for him. I can't see them paying for defense when you could go sign someone else on the free agent market who's going to play similar defense at half the cost each year. So,
Scott, are you more in alignment with Matt, who says, there's a year and a dollar number out there, or Blake, who says, I'm not really that interested?
I'm more with Blake. I'm really not that interested. I don't want to have them pay premium price for defense. I know he's a premier talent, and it's in a very dry shortstop market coming up. But I'm with Blake again. The defense for me, that just doesn't make me want to spend all in on him. I don't want to do that. There's a lot of options out there for the trade market, and I don't know. I hope Andrew Friedman is going that way, but it's trending more like Gavin Lux is looking at the shortstop.
Perfect segue, Scott, to our Gavin Lux conversation here. Obviously, it appears, as far as free agents go, I think that's Dansby Swanson is the line where once you dip below that, then Gavin Lux becomes the best option, my opinion. We'll talk about a couple of the free agent guys here. I've got a couple guys on my list. Scott and Matt tell me they've got somebody else that I haven't thought of as well. But let's talk about Gavin Lux, because We'll toot my own horn here a little bit. I have been saying for a couple of months that I thought Gavin Lux as the starting shortstop was a real thing. It appears to be getting more and more likely as time goes on. And so the question with Gavin Lux, and Blake, I'll come to you first, is the only question with Gavin Lux the glove, or is there some concern lingering for you about whether or not the offensive improvement we saw last year is actually sustainable?
If he was playing second base, I would be way more confident in his offense. But my concern is if he goes out and plays shortstop and he's not very good there, he makes a few errors. Does that start getting in his head? Does that you take that to his offense and let him affect him there? There's a lot of mental factors into playing baseball, and if he's not producing on the field on defense, then he might take it into offense, and that's just concerning to me. So.
And I mean, are you concerned about how concerned are you about his defense at shortstop? Because we know the shift is going away, and we know Gavin Lux is incredibly athletic. So there's some case to be made that his athleticism may be heightened in value because of his ability to get to baseballs that because of the shift he might need to, and yet his throwing arm has been a concern. So where are you at on Gavin Lux defensively at shortstop, Blake?
The arm is concerning to me. He's had problems making throws his whole career, and even at second base, it's still been a problem. So that's my biggest fear with him. And also with the range factor added in, you talked about, that has value at second base now too without the shift. Having a good defensive second baseman is like having another shortstop now without that. So I think he's really valuable there, and it limits his throws more. So that's where I'd keep him.
Matt, Gavin Lux at shortstop, are you okay with the bat and concerned about the glove, or do you have some reservations about the bat as well?
No, I'm with Blake. I think it's unfortunately intertwined. And I know, Gavin is somebody who says he tries to separate, whatever goes on defensively with stuff at the plate, but it's human nature, right? These players, they're not robots as much as, maybe fans might want them to be. And I would be concerned, as much as Lux did have a better season this year at at the plate, like there still were some inconsistent stretches mixed in with that, and so there's honestly reason to be concerned a little. Like I don't think we know yet what kind of player he will ultimately end up being, right?
Yeah.
I think he has the potential to be a very good player for the Dodgers and a contributor, but he hasn't shown me enough consistently for me to fully buy in. And I would worry that, like Blake said, if there's an error, whether it's just with the glove or throwing, that could bleed over to his swings. And also I think there is going to be significant pressure on, if it's Lux specifically, moving over to shortstop, because you're following Trey Turner, who followed Corey Seager. So basically two, kind of perennial all-stars. And the fans are going to be, upset that the Dodgers, at least at this point, don't look to be making any splashy moves. And so now Gavin Lux needs to be the answer at shortstop. I think it's almost like a recipe for disaster.
What's interesting, though, about the two guys you just mentioned, Matt, is that neither of them were necessarily outstanding defensively in Trey Turner or Corey Seager. So, Scott, I'll come to you. Like, I would say those two guys ranged from below average to slightly above fine defensively. Trey Turner and Corey Seager, they would have moments where they seemed to have stretch. Like Trey Turner, for example, had long stretches of solid play at shortstop, and then he would have moments like we saw in some critical moments where it wasn't as awesome. So where are you at on Gavin Lux? I mean, I'm reading the comments right now. We got half the people saying stop the Gavin Lux hate, and we got half the people saying he's going to make 50 errors if he plays shortstop this season. Which of those two sides do you fall on?
I don't know about 50 errors, but I mean, if it plays out that much, I mean, it could trend it could get ugly.
Okay.
But with I think that the conversation without the defensive shift is going to be a lot bigger than we think.
Yeah.
I think that impacts Gavin Lux a lot more. He won't have any help. He'll be on an island. And we saw him transitioning from, everyday like second baseman to utility man, and that wasn't the easiest thing for him. Just like Blake, Matt co-signed. Gavin Lux is a real rhythm and timing guy, and things bleed into one another. It's going to be difficult. I'm not excited about it. It's been a long time since the Dodgers haven't had a very stable. I know it's tough to follow up all-star after all-star after all-star, but Gavin Lux is a clear downgrade at both with the bat and the glove. So it'll be interesting. I'm not excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is interesting. So he just turned 25. That's one thing to remember here. This is still a guy who is not a fully formed product. Last season, 113 weighted runs created plus. You're like, hey, that's really good. I made the comment, like, before he got injured at the end of the season, he was top 20 in the National League in wins above replacement. So Gavin Lux was really good last season. But you look underneath the hood just a little bit on some of those offensive numbers, and I'll be honest, it's concerning. 33rd percentile in exit velocity, 48th percentile hard hit, 49th percentile expected batting average, 33rd percentile expected slugging, 32nd percentile barrel rate. There were only 5 categories where he was above average last year. That's strikeout rate, walk rate, chase rate, whiff rate, and base and his speed. So you've got a lot of bat-to-ball skills that are concerning, on top of the fact that in 2021, that weighted runs created plus number was 90. So he's put one above-average offensive season together, albeit the largest sample size we've ever had from Gavin Lux at the point in his career when you would start to expect some improvement. But I think the point that Matt and Blake both made about, is this a guy that could get into his head a little bit, where if you shift him to shortstop, he's thinking more, there's more pressure on him, all of a sudden things maybe start to go sideways, which it sounds like you all are concerned things would go sideways if he plays shortstop defensively. Then is that going to bleed into the offense, and are you maybe causing more problems than you're solving? Because keep in mind that with a guy like Gavin Lux, there's a hole somewhere. So, like, if Gavin Lux isn't the shortstop, then you desperately need him to play second base. So it's not like, is Gavin Lux going to play or not going to play? The question with Lux is, what position is he going to play? And if it's not Lux, then it brings us sort of to the fourth category, the fourth question here, which is, who else is out there? Like, if not Gavin Lux, then who? I think externally, free agent-wise, the top 2 guys out there, I would say, again, Matt has hinted at me that he has somebody else. The first is Elvis Andrus. This is a guy who's put up 5 wins above replacement over the last 2 seasons, was above average offensively last year, 103 OPS plus. He joined the White Sox and was really, really good, 116 OPS plus to close the season. Although, caveat, first above average offensive season since 2017, so had been a while for old Elvis. He's 34 years old. He's good defensively, 84th percentile and outs above average at shortstop. The other guy, Jose Iglesias, you might be familiar with, played for the Rockies last season. 2.7 wins above replacement the last couple of years. Below average offensively, below average defensively. But hey, Jose Iglesias exists. One other internal name I would throw out there is Jacob Amaya, one of the prospects that the Dodgers have on the 40-man roster. The scouting report on Amaya has been the glove is good. Like he might be the best defensive option. Or I should say this. He's probably a better defensive option than Gavin Lux. I think that's a safe thing to say. Someone correct me if you disagree with me on that. The question with him is offensively. Whereas it was really good offensively to begin last season in the minors, and it was not very good to close the season. So he's not a guy like, oh, whatever, just bring him up. He'll hit 240, 220. I think it's like there's real concern that he might be well below that as well. So, Blake, I'll come to you first. We'll let Matt save his additional person as a surprise. If it's not Swanson, and you're looking at Gavin Lux, Elvis Andrus, Jose Iglesias, Jacob Amaya, Chris Taylor, I guess another guy you could throw into this conversation. What do you make of that group?
If they're going with internal options, I'd go with Chris Taylor there and just leave Gavin Lux at second base where we know he's going to be comfortable and play well. If they're going outside the organization and they want to go free agency, I'd go with Elvis Andrus for a year, see if he can keep some of that magic alive. And if they want to make a trade, I'm going to throw Ahmed Rosario out there.
Okay.
He's making, I think, $10 million this year or something. The Guardians don't like to spend a lot of money. It's his final year. So maybe you could get him cheap, something like Landon Knack for him maybe. And he was pretty solid last year, a good defender. He's got some speed, former top prospect. So maybe there's still some offensive upside in there. But I just don't feel comfortable with Lux at shortstop. So I'd put Taylor there if I had to go internally.
So you'd go, so Taylor and then a trade and then Gavin Lux and then Andrus and then Gavin Lux at shortstop. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, go ahead. Surprise us.
So, I mean, I will say Andrews was somebody who was on my radar as well, but I think that he may end up signing for more than the Dodgers might want to pay just because of how the market has gone so far. So, honestly, I think at this point, just look for somebody defensively to shore up the position for a year and take a shot on Andrelton Simmons.
The smile that you have, like, terrified me for the name that was coming next.
So, I know, like, he didn't hit worth a lick. I know that, but I think he had like 4 or 5 defensive runs saved. He was positive in terms of outs above average, stuff like that. So I think defensively he'll at least give you something. And if it's only for a year and if it's maybe on a pretty team friendly deal, then I think you just live with it and you fill your holes other ways.
Okay. Scott, where you at?
I would, if they're going internally, then I would definitely look at Chris Taylor. He's played almost 2,000 career innings at shortstop. I would feel most comfortable with that. I wouldn't meddle around with Gavin Lux. I would let him continue that rhythm at second base instead of just telling him to go. Now your shift is gone. No, without that, extra little advantage. Go learn it. Go relearn a new a position in the big leagues. That for me, that's tough. I would let Chris Taylor do it. Find a rhythm there, but again, that takes away his versatility as a utility man. But I think having a steady shortstop like Chris Taylor there would be great. But I'm going to throw you a name that I've talked to Blake about this, and we've spoke about it for a few years now. Tim Anderson in a trade. Yeah. I like that. That's one that if they really want to use their prospect capital, because there's a few guys that have no path, just not a clear path. I would go make a call for Tim Anderson, considering where the Chicago White Sox are. They haven't done a thing in this offseason, and it looks like they're just like a boat without a paddle. So. I mean, and we're a head coach, so it's tough. I would make a call for Tim Anderson. Has a club option for next year, and I think that's incredibly appealing. It's expensive, without a doubt. But if there's ever a time for them to make a move for a cost-effective, high-end shortstop, and he's had, I think, like 4 or 5 straight seasons with a WRC plus over 100. So you're getting an elite glove and a fantastic bat who hits for average. I know Dodger fans always want to talk about, I saw a guy that said 279 was a bad average.
There we go. Matt, big batting average guy, Moreno over here.
I get it. I understand. So if there's ever a guy, then Tim Anderson's one that would be without a doubt a target for me. He has a club option for next year, and his AAV is like $12.5 million. Yeah. So that's cost controlled. That's perfect. I think that's my guy. I think it's a home run if they decide to pull that trigger.
Yeah, and the reports are Anderson's not available. Whether or not that's accurate or not, it remains to be seen. But that's what I've kind of long said, is that there's 2 pathways here. There's 2 ways to build a team, to build an elite team if you're the Dodgers. Option 1 is to spend a lot of money, which they have done historically. And option 2 is to spend less money and to spend more prospects, so to speak. And that's kind of what I've said all along when we did our offseason show, me, Matt, and Daniel, was if you don't want to spend the money, that's fine. And I've long said I think the roster is really good as is. I'm not advocating for leaving it as is, but if you need a starting pitcher, just go trade for a cost-controlled one. If you need a shortstop, go trade for a cost-controlled one. I agree with you. Tim Anderson would be the best one. Whether or not he's available, it remains to be seen. We got a super comment here from Michael. We appreciate that. Ha-Sung Kim trade. Moreno, I'll come to you. You think that Preller and Andrew Friedman swapping phone calls?
No, there's no shot. I mean, even if there was maybe interest from the Dodgers, Preller from just wanting to be difficult would ask for the world, and that's not Friedman's MO to overpay, whether money or prospects. So I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of those deals that I understand why the question is being asked, because on paper it makes sense. This is a guy that, who knows where he's going to play defensively for the Padres. Obviously is a guy that would be better than many, if not all, of the options that we just laid out for the Dodgers. The only problem for him is the team that he plays for. The Dodgers and the Padres are not going to want to trade because neither one's going to want to have to deal with the headlines 3 years from now if one of the guys sent the other way ends up making a big play or ends up making a big impact. I mean, just imagine if O'Neal Cruz or Yordan Alvarez was not starring for the Pirates or the Astros, but was starring for the Padres. That might be the only way Andrew Friedman ever loses his job, is if something like that were to happen. And I'd probably still defend him, to be fair. So I think so. This is the interesting spot that the Dodgers are in, because I'll close with this and then we can kind of bat this one around. When I look at the Dodgers roster, it feels like what they need. Let me put it this way. It seems like on paper they desperately need a shortstop, when to me, I actually think the way that they've built their roster with flexibility, with guys like Chris Taylor and with guys like Gavin Lux, is that if the market dictates you're not getting a shortstop for a decent deal, then the Dodgers don't have to lock in on, we desperately need a shortstop. Okay, fine, we'll put Chris Taylor there, and now there's a bigger hole in the outfield. Let's go get an outfielder. Again, maybe it's via trade, maybe it's via free agency. I've seen lots of rumors. A.J. Pollock, rumor is one that's been batted around. Michael Conforto is a rumor that's been batted around. Michael Brantley, another name that I've seen connected to the Dodgers through various people. There are guys like that out there. Obviously, you've got Outman, you've got Trace Thompson, you've got Michael Busch, who maybe could play some out there, Miguel Vargas floating around. So, Matt, I'll come to you. It feels like the Dodgers could stay put at the shortstop position, whether that's Chris Taylor to short, and that gives you Gavin Lux at second, Max Muncy at third, and then Miguel Vargas kind of as your DH, with a hole in the outfield, because you probably don't want Trace Thompson and James Outman being your center and left fielder on opening day. Or you kind of move some of those pieces around. It feels like there's one bat that is needed, but do you agree with the statement that the Dodgers roster gives them flexibility? They can find that bat at kind of any position they want to, maybe other than first base or catcher.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, as much as my moving Lux to shortstop isn't my choice. It's not egregious if that's the path that they end up going. And then you figure out, is second base more opportunities for Max Muncy or maybe Miguel Vargas, and vice versa. Is Miguel Vargas going to be playing third base? And like I said, I'm not fully convinced that the Dodgers have their total faith in him playing third. So maybe second base is where he kind of ends up, and there's, opportunities for him that everybody wants to see and that Dave Roberts said would be coming. Real quick, though, before we move on to everybody else, I'm disappointed you didn't mention Blake's guy, Joey Gallo, when talking about the outfield.
Yeah, his feelings are hurt.
And that we haven't gotten a Jeter Downs reference from the panel so far.
Yeah, there's been some Jeter Downs references in the comments, DFA'd by the Red Sox. I was just setting Blake up. I mean, I was going to see Scott kind of wussed out on his Carlos Correa take this morning and said he didn't want to sign him. So, Blake, are you going to follow suit, or are you going to kind of man up here a little bit and defend Joey Gallo?
I would give Gallo all the money, but the Dodgers are spending money, so I'm not even going to entertain the idea and get our feelings hurt here.
Where are you at, Blake? Do you agree with the idea that, as constructed, that maybe the best path forward for the Dodgers isn't obsessing on finding a shortstop, and it's actually obsessing on going and finding the best bat that they can and slotting that person into the lineup and the out in the field, kind of wherever that person is most comfortable?
Yeah, I feel like the thing they need most is consistency and someone you can trust. They're relying on a lot of question marks going into this year. Is Miguel Vargas going to hit? Is Michael Busch going to be ready? Is Trace Thompson going to keep hitting? Is Chris Taylor going to rebound? Is Max Muncy going to rebound? There's just so many question marks, and that's what scares me most about the team. I believe in the talent, but you're just risking a lot on outcomes that might not happen. So if you bring in someone like maybe a JD Martinez, I'd feel a lot more comfortable putting him in the middle of the lineup because you know he's going to hit, and they just need someone you know they're going to hit.
Okay, so JD Martinez is the name out there that kind of is appealing to you?
I mean, off the top of my head, yeah, I'd be fine with Michael Brantley too, or they just need someone like that they can plug into their lineup and be confident they're going to produce.
Okay. And that person's not Joey Gallo, just to clarify there, Blake?
I mean, it's been reported they're not interested in him, but if they want to miss out on the 40 homers...
Just dodging the question like it's nobody's business. Scott, what about you? Do the Dodgers have enough at the shortstop position to where you feel comfortable saying just go get the best bat available regardless of where they play?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so. It's just, it bleeds into the Chris Taylor thing. If they choose to go with him, you have to bank on him being healthy, him finding that consistency, because we saw how low he went. Gavin Lux, I think moving him to short would create a hole at second base. And you're planning on Max Muncy playing there instead. So it's just a lot of question marks. There's not a lot of concrete things at the moment. A lot of rebound years have to happen, just like Blake mentioned. The Dodgers, we expect them to have a star at every position, but they're not going to have that. It's not going to be that way. There will be role players, but in fact that a lot of the rookies right now are going to be role players. And I mean, this lineup needs them to be there and be consistent. But what if they're not?
Yeah.
And then that just creates more question marks. So it's going to be a difficult year for fans that we all expect the Dodgers to have a premier thing, but they're not spending this year. It's a tax reset year. It's unfortunate, but it sucks that it came with the NL West handing out checks like no tomorrow, and that's where they're at. So fans need to buckle up because it might not be the expectations. It might not live up to their expectations of what the Dodgers have been like for the last few years.
And you know what's really going to make it worse? When they don't even sign Ohtani next year.
Yeah, man.
That's going to be the knife twisting.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, and I would only push back, and again, if you've watched me on the show, you know probably what I'm about to say. This roster is way better than I think a lot of people give it credit for. I think it's very easy to look at the guys that are gone from last season, and just assume that if you lose Trey Turner and if you lose Tyler Anderson, if you lose Andrew Heaney, that they're Cody Bellinger. If you lose these guys, that therefore obviously you are going to be bad. And guess what? That's a great assumption, because most teams, if they lose Trey Turner and Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney and all these other guys, they will be bad. But the Dodgers are not most teams. It's still Mookie Betts, and it's still Freddie Freeman, and it's still Will Smith, and it's still Max Muncy, and it's still Clayton Kershaw, and Julio Urias, and Evan Phillips, and you just go down the line. Like, the bullpen's going to be very good. The starting pitching is going to be very good. The offense, is the 7, 8, 9 hole going to be way more full of question marks than in years past? I mean, I don't know. Cody Bellinger was living down there, so I wouldn't necessarily say that's a surefire thing. But, the top of the lineup is still going to be awesome. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Will Smith, that trio together is still one of the best 3, 4, 5 holes in all of Major League Baseball. And are you telling me Max Muncy and Chris Taylor and all these guys are going to have down years again? Are we betting against Gavin Lux, the former top prospect who was, performed well in some metrics and poorly in other metrics? So I just think, you add all that up, and yes, it's way more question marks than we are comfortable with, that we are used to. And I would say, are they going to go win 112 games next year? No, they're not going to win 112 games. But is this team going to win less than 92 next year? I don't think so. I think they're going to be really freaking good. I think they're one of the 5 best teams in baseball still. And I know people are going to think I'm a homer and think I'm crazy, but go find me the roster that doesn't have question marks on it. There are some. That's why I said they're in the top 5. I didn't say they're number 1. So I just think, I understand you look at the outgoings, you look at the balance sheet, and you say, I'm not happy with this. That's fine. I get it. I would just push back and say, this roster is very, very good. So, Blake, I'll let you go first if you want to respond to that. If you disagree, if you think I'm a lunatic, feel free.
I mostly agree with it. I just think it would be a lot easier to accept it if they weren't coming off a season where they won 111 games and then lost to the Padres.
Yeah.
Winning 1 game in the playoffs. That's tough to deal with, especially as fans. That's such a disappointing end of the season, and then you have to accept that the ownership isn't going to spend money this season too. It's just tough to deal with that. And they're still probably going to be good, but there's just too many question marks. A team like the Dodgers shouldn't have question marks, or at least not this many. Like 1 or 2 is fine, but when you're talking about 5 or 6 or 7 even, like that's concerning, especially with how good the Padres are now.
I agree that last season leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And I do think, like, if you look at the roster, it's unique in that we're still saying that Max Muncy and Chris Taylor are question marks. We're still saying that Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May's health are question marks. Like, I think these are some of the things that from a roster building perspective, you kind of hoped that okay, we're going to take a chance with Outman and with Vargas and maybe with Michael Busch and with, Noah Syndergaard. Like, those are guys like, okay, we'll see what happens. But Matt, when they built this roster, they probably weren't expecting the Max Muncy's and the Chris Taylors and even Gavin Lux probably to still be question marks at this point. So do you agree with my overall premise that this roster is better than people give it credit for and that this team is still very, very good? Or are you disagreeing?
I agree. I guess what I might disagree is on the number of games that I think you said they would win, like about 95, right? And I know that wasn't like an official prediction or anything, but like honestly, I think they could easily top out like around 92. And for me, the conversation just kind of ties back to almost like the postseason where it's an odds thing and you want to give yourself the best potential odds for it. And like Blake mentioned, they have a lot of question marks and a lot of things sort of need to go right. And all I can think of really is this past season where, you were counting on Walker Buehler to come back healthy and pitch well, and that's why you didn't get a starter at the trade deadline and stuff like that. And Dustin May then ended up getting hurt as well. Then Tony Gonsolin got hurt. And so I just don't like the probability, like the numbers game that they're playing. And I'll close with, you're saying all this stuff, there's great things about the Dodgers now, but we have video of you adamantly stating Andrew Friedman has done nothing.
Matt, do you want to see what kind of power I have? Watch what happens, Matt. There goes Matt. Oh, where did Matt go? Oh, he just disappeared. Can you imagine? Oh, he's back. Okay, that was interesting. That must be a glitch in the system. Scott, I'll let you get the last word here. Right. Dodgers going to finish third behind the Giants this year or what?
No. I've got a little rant. This is about go back to Andrew Friedman. People need to stop doubting what Andrew Friedman can do. The reason why they went on that run is because Andrew Friedman's patient. He lets the market come to him. Freddie Freeman, I don't know if Freddie Freeman was on their 100% radar until he became available.
Yeah.
So he doesn't make reactionary signings. He's not going to do that. Yeah, Blake, I'm sorry, man. This is there's a lot of questions, and that's just how it is. But it's a very talented roster as is. There's going to be questions. This doesn't make me an Astros homer. The Astros won the World Series because they won it, because they were the better team. But you look at that roster and you tell me, if you just flat out look at that, or would you be confident in that roster at the beginning of the year? Like what they went into, Chas McCormick, Kyle Tucker, these are your guys, like Martin Maldonado, Christian Vasquez. Like it's not as talented as a roster as the Dodgers had. Sure, from a pitching standpoint, it might be, but the Dodgers have an incredibly talented team.
Yeah.
But every team is going to have question marks. The Dodgers just have to rely on some of their role players to step up and a lot of things to go right. You just happen to lose Trey Turner. You're not spending money in a year where everybody is. Yeah. Handed out $1 billion to all to the shortstop prospect, like the guys on the market. It sucks, but this is where they're at. And the Dodgers have to play. Players got to play. That's been my thing behind defending Dave Roberts for years. Players got to play. He'll make bonehead moves, but at the end of the day, players got to play. Yeah. And they still have all-stars in multiple positions, and they need to step up. And that's flat out what it is. You can't sugarcoat it any way about it.
Yeah.
Like guys had down years. They were dealing with things. Guys were injured. Chris Taylor was terrible. Max Muncy had to figure out how to play baseball again. So there were just a lot of question marks last year, and look what they did.
Yeah.
And so it's just that their MVP candidates played like they should have, and that's what they need to do again, and rely on your role players. That's what they need to do. That's just how I see it. I'm with Jeff, man. This is an incredibly talented team, but there's a lot of questions, but I still think they're incredibly good.
Yeah. It's like if you're buying lottery tickets, I think the Dodgers have a lot of them. Like, do you need a couple of them to hit? And the lottery is probably a bad example because we're talking about 1 in a million. But it's like if you need to roll a certain thing on the dice, the Dodgers have a ton of rolls. Like if Outman doesn't work out, they've got Trace Thompson. If Trace Thompson doesn't work out, they've got fill in the blank. Like on the pitching side, you might look at the starting pitching rotation and say, well, I don't know if we should feel good about Syndergaard. Okay, well, Bobby Miller, Michael Grove, Gavin Stone. Like they just have a bunch of dudes. Bullpen, I don't think any of us are worried about because they'll always figure that group out. I just think the Dodgers have enough darts in their holster that yes, they've got holes and yes, they've got questions, but they've got enough opportunities there and enough options there to make it work. So we'll see. I might be proven wrong. This team might be terrible this year, but I'm with Scott. I'm going to bet on Andrew Friedman, figuring it out. And guess what? The final word. The offseason's not over. Like, if they traded for Tim Anderson tomorrow, would everybody stop freaking out? Probably. If they traded for a starting pitcher tomorrow, would everybody stop freaking out? Probably. So let's just take a deep breath. Let Andrew Friedman do his thing. He has earned the right to be trusted, and we'll go from there. That's Matt. That's Blake. That's Scott. We appreciate you joining us. This is DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and ring the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast somewhere, please subscribe, rate, and review. We'd greatly appreciate that. Check out these guys' work over at DodgerBlue.com. Make sure you're following us on DodgerBlue1958 on social media. And, of course, we've got all our Twitter handles here, so give us a follow there as well. Enjoy the rest of your night. And, of course, as always, go Dodgers.